All right. We'll go ahead and the floor is yours, Mike. Lead us on our journey to through RuneQuest.
Okay, well, welcome to RuneQuest, everyone. Absolutely one of my favorite TTRPGs of all time. RuneQuest is fantasy role playing, so in that aspect, very similar to D&D, though the rules and the mechanics are different. RuneQuest is also not Iron Age; it's Bronze Age. So you will find some different weapons, different technologies in RuneQuest. Not nearly the Iron Age weapon uh, variety that you've got. So what I want to do is go over the player sheet and point out the important things, and as I go through, explain the rules on how you use that. RuneQuest has done recently a lot of world building. The whole world of Glorantha is very well laid out, very well developed. They do a lot now with the history of the world of Glorantha and your family history. I'm not going to play that in this. There's just not time to get into all of that. So things like birth year, um, uh, the family history, and things like that, we're not going to worry about. But uh, just real quickly, I know we've covered this, but everything is D100, so you'll need your D100s to accomplish anything. And then once you get into combat, some of the spells, you'll use some of the other dice. Um, RuneQuest is skills based. It's not class based, and so you can pretty much be whatever you want. You just apply your basically your points to the skills that you most want to use as a character. So I know we've got philosophers and scribes here, which may not sound like big adventurers, but they do have some skills that will be very useful in the playing. So just starting on the character sheet, name is very obvious. We've talked about birth year. Feel free to enter the age that you wish your character to be. I've assigned you occupations, and the occupations provide you with certain skills and abilities. Which is why they become important. And as we get into skills, I'll explain that a little bit more. Ransom is just like it sounds. If you get kidnapped, it's what you're worth to be freed. But it also has some other aspects of the within the gameplay. But it's basically your life's value to the world around you. Gender, feel free to fill that in. I won't question. Homeland is does have an effect on gameplay. There are a number of homelands. I've assigned you each your homeland. That will give you, again, certain abilities based on how you were raised and the culture in which you were raised. Reputation, we're not playing, but that is good for a campaign where your character can establish their reputation, and things like charm and influence and even intimidation can be augmented by your reputation. Standard of living is what it costs you basically annual to live. A lot of you are seeing standard of living free. Like soldiers don't have to pay to live because their housing and their clothing and their food are all taken care of. Most of you have a base income. Uh, RuneQuest is built not on full-time adventuring, but really part-time adventuring. You could possibly be a farmer in RuneQuest. And so in the off season, you farm and you earn this base income that you can then apply to your adventuring, to buying new equipment, to hiring servants, or however you want to do it. Tribe and clan get more detail of homeland, but they aren't consequential to the game, so I'm skipping over those. Campaign and player are yours to fill in. Then we get into the next section, which gives you we're going to get more into detail of gameplay. Armor and hit locations. RuneQuest, you can hit an individual body part, and you can disable an individual body part. So when you're doing combat, there's a D20 roll that you make to determine what body part you hit. And each body part has a certain number of hit points. And once you have been hit for more than that number of hit points, that body part becomes useless. This is especially critical when you're getting hit in the head and the chest, because if your head or your chest become disabled, that kind of really affects your ability to live. Let me get into a little bit more detail in combat in just a second, but you'll also see AP, which is your armor points. Unlike armor class in D&D, where it affects your ability to be hit, armor does not affect your ability to be hit, but armor absorbs damage before it gets through to your body. So I believe one of you has some really good armor. I'm thinking that's Aaron as our heavy infantryman. He's got, I believe, 5 armor points on a large part of his body. That means that if I were to swing my sword and hit him in his right arm, and I do 6 points of damage, 5 of those damage points are absorbed by the armor, and 1 gets through to actually hit his hit points to damage his body. So that's how armor works. It absorbs damage so that you actually receive less damage to your body. Another note on hit points, if you look farther down the sheet at the bottom of the first page, you see a hit point table right here, and I've put into your combat notes what your total hit points are. And that's going to be different than the sum of what you have for your body parts. But that's the total amount of damage that you can absorb and remain alive. So if I hit you, the example that I gave, if I hit Aaron in the arm and I do 1 hit point of damage that gets through to his body, he would mark that on his arm to keep track of how good a shape his arm is, but he would also take that 1 hit point off of his total hit points. So I could really do some damage to his arms and reduce his hit points to 0 and kill him. That said, you don't have a lot of hit points, neither in your particular body parts nor in your whole entire body, which makes combat a lot deadlier in RuneQuest. So, sorry, Aaron, being the tank is not all that it's cracked up to be.
I'll consider myself warned.
The other thing you have here is a shield, and I'll get into this a little bit more, but a shield wielding is a skill like anything else. And so you maybe have a 55% chance of successfully wielding your shield. If you do, then you're able to parry or block an opponent's blow, and then your shield takes those hit points. The shields have a lot more hit points than armor do. So having a shield, being good at it, is really beneficial to your player character. So let's get into combat. Let's talk about what I have come to learn is called crunchy combat. This is a big difference that RuneQuest has from D&D and other role-playing games. The flow of combat happens like this. The first time we go around, you say your intention, what you intend to do that round of combat. This is important because you're committed to doing that. So let's say that we're attacking the Cockroach Lord, which I warned you about, who's not actually in this game. And Ken and Aaron are both planning to physically attack the Cockroach Lord. And Ken is going first, and he hits and he does damage, and he kills the Cockroach Lord. Aaron can then not change what he had planned to do. He ends up either hitting the dead body or just losing his turn. He can't turn around and say, well, I want to attack a henchman instead. So you issue your intention, and the GM also has to issue the intention of any NPCs or monsters that you're going up against. So everybody knows what everybody else is doing. Then you go through combat, and there is an item similar to initiative in RuneQuest, and it's called strike rank. And you have two different strike ranks, and you'll see that under your characteristics, the strength and constitution. You'll see size SR and dex SR. And size SR, size strike rank, is your speed in physical combat, in swordplay or mace or hammer, whatever you're playing. Dexterity strike rank impacts your missile weapons as well as your spell casting. So at the beginning of the turn, and this happens at the beginning of combat, and it doesn't change. It's not like initiative where it's going to change. We determine each person's strike rank, and the lower your strike rank, the earlier you have your turn in combat. So the size, the bigger you are, the lower your size strike rank, because you've got the long arm in order to get out and hit first. Same thing with weapons. The bigger the weapon, the lower the strike rank. So when you're determining your size strike rank, you're adding what you have on your sheet as size and adding the strike rank of your combat melee weapon. So you could have a 2, a 4, a 6, and it goes up to a maximum of 12.
Okay. I have one thing real quick, Mike.
Okay.
If you could, just for people watching, would you be able to scroll down or show like one of the pre-mades that you sent to us? And
absolutely.
That way you can, because that way they could follow along and see what you're doing. Because on our sheets, when you're explaining and like I'm scrolling and looking down, and it makes sense when I look at the hit points and look at all these things. But for someone watching, they might not be able to tell with just the sheet up. But
okay, then I'm going to choose a character that is not one that you're playing, but one that has been pre-genned.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So for like when we roll so we have a strike rank. The strike rank determine, like, when do we say our course of action or our intention prior to the strike rank, or the strike rank, or is it like kind of at the same time?
Strike rank happens first, like initiative does, because we're going to do all of this in order.
Okay, and then we state our intentions for the round.
Then you state your intentions for the round, and then we get But back to your question, to your point. This character, who is a Praxian Impala Rider Light Cavalry, he's got a size strike rank of 2, and his preferred weapon is the short sword, which has a strike rank of 3. So this character would have a total strike rank of 5 in melee combat. So if anyone has a lower strike rank, they would go before him. If they have a higher strike rank, they would go after him. So we would set up all our strike ranks. We'd know who's got what strike rank, who goes in what order. Then we do intentions, and then we go into the action of the combat. And we'll start with melee combat. What happens with melee combat is, and what makes it different is, you roll to attack, and you've got a percentage roll, which is how good you are at attacking. And so our light cavalryman has an 85 score with his short sword. which means he's got an 85% chance of hitting with his short sword. So you roll your D100s, and you've got to roll an 85 or lower in order to successfully use that skill. So he's going to roll. I rolled a 75, not a great roll, but it's under 85, so he would hit. Now his opponent has an opportunity to do several things. You can stand there and take the hit. You can use your weapon or your shield to parry the blow, or you have a skill called dodge, which allows you to evade, like it says, to dodge the blow. And each of those has a percentage ability. So just to use this character, if he were fighting himself, someone would have the opportunity to parry with his shield. He's got a 75% chance of parrying with his shield. And so making the roll, I roll 100, which is a fumble. And so the parry with a shield does not work. At that point, we resolve the combat. We would roll damage, and we would move on to the next character. Dexterity strike rank and size strike rank, they're on the same scale. So if Ken has a 6 dexterity strike rank and Aaron has a 3 size strike rank, Aaron's going first with his melee combat, and the missile combat would come later. Is all that making sense? Is everybody following me okay with this?
Yes.
There are tables, and let me get to one of the tables. That's not what I wanted to do just there. Let me pull this up and share my screen real quick. And this is the combat results table. And I know it's a little bit hard to read, but I've got this with me. So you've got a critical attack, a special attack, a normal attack, a failed attack, and a fumbled attack. The critical attack, and I've got another table for those, but I'll show that a little bit later. Like D&D, you roll very, very low in Runequest. That's the good roll. Very, very low. You score critical. If you score 1/5 of your ability, that is a special attack. A normal attack is you make it. It's more than 1/5, but lower than your ability. Failed attack is above your ability, and a fumbled attack is basically a 96 to 100. That's always going to fumble, no matter how good you are. So we look at your normal attack versus a fumbled parry, which is what I just rolled. So the attacker rolls normal damage, and the defender takes damage and rolls on the fumbles table, which there is actually a table to determine the results of your fumble. And let me go share the character sheet again. So that's the basics of combat. Once you've hit someone, you roll the d20 to determine where you hit them. And again, I've got a nice table for that. Where did it go? There it is.
Looks like it's on the character sheet too.
Yeah, I think it is.
That's cool.
So yeah, you roll your d20 and you determine where you hit your opponent, and then you roll the roll the damage, and then we move on to the next person in combat. So any other questions about combat? How that's going to work?
It's a cool
Let's
system.
go on.
Seems pretty straightforward.
It is. It takes a couple of tries to go through to get used to it. But once you get into the groove of it, it goes fairly quickly. Typo on.
Where would you determine like the dodge action or?
That's on the second page. So you've got your agility scores here.
I see it. Okay.
And you've got your dodge ability.
All right. Cool. Okay.
So this Impala rider is very, very bad at dodging. He's only got a 7% chance of successfully dodging. So in combat, he would choose to use his shield to parry. You can also use your weapon to parry. So if you've got I think we've got somebody with a two-handed broadsword. You would use your sword to parry, and your parry ability would be the same as your attack ability. So if this character, for whatever, lost his shield and wanted to parry with his short sword, he would have an 85% chance of parrying with a short sword. And then, sorry, go ahead.
No, I did. I did have one more question. So in your example, when I was being attacked and they hit my right arm, and in this particular case, my right arm has an AP of 6 and a hit HP of 5, and let's say they did 7 points of damage, right? So the armor would absorb 6 of those points, and then I would take 1 point of damage to the actual arm. So my question is, once my armor on my right arm has absorbed those 6 points of armor damage, right? Is it broken and can no longer absorb, or does it absorb that much every time it's hit?
It absorbs that much every time it's hit.
Sweet.
And is that the same with the shield? Because I noticed on the shield it looked like it had a hit point value, not an AP value.
It does, but good catch. There is a subtle difference. You will also notice while we're talking about it that melee weapons also have hit point values. And there are times in the combat table where the result of the combat, successful hit, successful parry, and I'd have to go back and look at the table for specifics, but you can actually do damage to the shield.
Oh, okay.
So the shield will typically absorb 8 points of damage, but the shield can also have its hit points reduced. It can take actual damage to the shield, and if the shield drops below or drops to 0 hit points, the shield becomes broken.
Okay. All right.
And I have had people parry with their sword often enough that they actually broke the sword.
That was going to be my question. If weapons have HP as well, is that a possibility? And you just, yeah, it sounds like it is.
Yes.
Interesting. Very interesting.
I would imagine that gets into those special attacks that you were talking about before.
Right, on that table,
Yeah.
if I critical hit and you critical parry, then bad things start to happen because we're really hitting each other hard. This little checkbox, you'll see these all over. They are it's just a checkbox, but one of the really cool things I like about Runequest is you can improve your ability by successfully using the ability. So we just had the example that my character, this one hit Aaron, successfully damaged his right arm. I would just check that box and only do it once per basically gaming session. When I successfully use it at the end of the session, when my character's got a chance to rest and to study and to reflect, then he has the ability to take his short sword ability and go up from 85%. In this case, you would have to roll higher than your percentage, so he only has really a 15% chance of improving that ability. But I would roll, and I rolled a 94, so I rolled above it, I succeeded, and then I would roll a d10. I rolled a 5, so he would actually go up to 90% with his short sword after successfully using it in combat.
I see.
And that goes for all of your abilities. So you can continue to improve and get better and better. So that's the basics of combat. We also have rune affinities. It is called Runequest, after all. Runes and cults, the worship of the different gods, really does affect gameplay. These are your rune affinities. You choose these as you're building your character. You choose the ones you want. Your homeland will give you bonuses with some of the runes. But the big use of these runes is called runic inspiration. You're about it, and it similar to D&D inspiration in a way. It's one time per. I forget exactly how they put it, but you can only use it once in a certain situation. So you're down to your dying breath, your hit points are low, so is your opponent, you've got one shot left, and you've really got to make it. Then you can request runic inspiration, and you would roll the D100 against the rune that you choose. In this case, our light cavalryman would probably choose fire. If he were smart, he would roll against the fire rune. He rolls 29, so he was successfully getting runic inspiration. It's not a special roll or a critical roll, but he would get a bonus then on his attack. And there's a table for this. It would give him basically a 10% bonus. So instead of having to make the 85, he would have 95 with a short sword. So that is something you can pull out if you really want to have that bonus, make that roll. You can choose to use runic inspiration to help you with that, and that goes with the power runes as well. And these also have check marks, and if you successfully use your runic inspiration, then you can improve your rune score. So you can go from 70 up to 75, 80, whatever, by improving that. So that's the basics of runes. These also will you choose your runes, and the different gods have runes associated with them as well. And so by choosing your runes, your gods will affect which gods that you might want to worship and what kind of spells that you're able to use through that worship of that cult. So we'll get into magic. You do have a cult. There are, and this, because we're not getting into details of character creation, we won't go into this a lot. But your cult does give you certain abilities. It gives you certain magic spells, and it does affect your rune powers. There are two types of magic in Runequest. There's rune magic, and there is spirit magic. And they're very different. The rune magic, they have very different spells. The rune magic tends to be more powerful, but it's also very limited. For example, you have 3 rune points as an initiate into your cult. That means you can cast up to 3 points of rune spells. And you probably saw in your book that different spells have different point values. Typically it's 1, which means you could cast up to 3 rune spells. And once you use a rune point, it takes a lot to get it back. You do have to go to your cult temple, you have to go through a worship ceremony, and you have to earn back your rune points from your god through worship, through meditation. So rune magic is powerful, but it's also very limited in the amount that you can use during an adventure or campaign. The other kind of magic is spirit magic. This is not as powerful magic, but you have a lot more flexibility. You have the ability to use it a lot more. Down here, you have your magic points. This is not a particularly magical, powerful character who only has 8 magic points. But you see here in the spirit magic descriptions, detect enemies, for example, is a 1-point spell. So were our cavalrymen to cast detect enemies, he would use one of his magic points and he would go down to 7 magic points. Heal is listed as variable, so depending on the number of magic points you use, the heal spell becomes more powerful and you're able to heal more. But in doing that, you do use up more of your magic points. Once you get down to 0 magic points, you go unconscious.
Okay.
So you have to be careful about using your magic points. Some of you have more than others, but you do have that limitation. And magic points are regained just like hit points. You do have a healing rate for your magic points, so you do regain those naturally, unlike the rune points that you have to earn through sucking up to your god, basically. Does that make sense so far?
Yes. What is the action economy in this game? So like when we have a turn, and there different action economies depending on the type of thing, like whether we're in a narrative scene or whether we're in a combat encounter?
Define that term. I'm not familiar with what you're asking.
Okay, action economy, like in D&D 5e, you have a move, a standard action, and a bonus action. And that's what you can do on your turn in a combat. In narrative, it's more loosey goosey. It's whatever the DM decides. Yeah, you have enough time to do that.
Yeah, like, so basically, could we make if we choose to make a melee attack, can we use any kind of magic, or are those two separate, or can you do all of it?
Those are two separate. There aren't. I say this with qualification. There aren't bonus actions in Runequest. That said, there are ways to take 2 attacks in Runequest. Basically, you've got 12 strike ranks. So there's 12 divisions of time within that combat round. And spells, combat. So, for example, this character has a combat strike rank of 5. So he could strike at 5. He could then strike again at 10 and would not be able to strike again. So you would get essentially would be a bonus action, but you would not be able to, if your strike rank were high enough, you would not be able to do that twice during a turn, because adding the 2 numbers together, the 6 and the 6, would be 12.
So this is the size strike rank?
Either size or dex.
Okay.
Depending on whether it's melee or ranged, right?
Right.
Or ranged. Dex also applies to casting of spells.
Okay,
So you would cast at your dex strike rank plus any magic points above 1. So if you're casting detect enemy at 1 point, this character would do that at strike rank 4. if they were doing demoralize, because that's 2, they would do that at strike rank 5.
Because they have a
I
dex
see,
strike rank
okay.
of 3.
Right.
Dex strike rank of 4
4.
plus 1 extra point plus 1
Is
point for the
5.
extra point of spell.
So demoralize would be, they would do it at 6.
They would do that at 5. So
But
a
it's
1 point spell, the 1 point spell, you don't add the spell to the dex. You use the dex. So fanaticism, because that's 1 point, would
okay.
go at 4. Demoralize, because it's 2 points, you would add that 1 extra point to the 4, and that would go at a 5.
So let's say
Okay.
we had a magic spell that was 6 points. You would still only add 1.
You would add 5. So the first point, the first magic point is free. Every point above that adds to your strike rank.
Okay. All right. So I'm confused because demoralize is 2. He has a strike rank of dex of 4. So why isn't it 6?
Because the first point is free.
The first point is free.
The first magic point is free, yeah.
And then you add after that.
Yeah.
All right.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, so basically it's dex strike rank plus, in parentheses, your magic points minus 1.
Exactly.
So if it's a 1 point magic spell, that becomes a 0. If it's a 2, it becomes a 1. 3 becomes a 2. Yada yada yada.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Clear.
Clear as mud.
Yeah, exactly.
The problem is it always makes sense right now, and then it'll like actually come to play, and I'll be like, wait, I don't know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Here we go. Okay. Some of your magic spells are contested. This gets into in D&D, it would be a con save against a certain spell. You have the ability to resist a spell. No, this is the abilities result table. It's not this is the critical and special results table. That's not the table I was looking for. This is the table I'm looking for. So I'm casting the demoralize spell against Cat. And I have a power of 14. And this becomes a power versus power, because power is where your magic ability comes from. And so as the spellcaster, I have a power of 14. And Kat, what is your power?
It is 17.
17. So Kat has a much better power than I do. So I'm going to go here where 17 meets 14.
35.
And it's a 35. And so Kat would have to roll I would have to roll a 35 or lower in order for that magic spell to take effect.
Okay.
So I'm casting demoralize on Cat. I know I've got a 35. I roll a 44. My spell fails.
Okay. So instead of the target saving against the spell, the caster has to try to overcome the target's resistance.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right.
That depends on my ability to overcome her, in this case, superior power.
Okay.
And if she were really particularly weak and had an 8 power and I had a 14, then I would have an 80% chance of that spell affecting her.
Okay.
It does get interesting because healing is actually a resistible spell.
Can you choose to avoid resisting it, or do you always have to try to overcome?
No, you can accept being healed, but you can also resist being healed and force the character to force you to become healed.
Okay.
Leave
All
me
right.
dead. Don't touch me.
I ironically, before we started all this, I was like, I think I might play my character who has like a death wish. Who would take, it would be greatly offended by you trying to deny him his outcome.
His eternal destiny.
Yes.
And screen sharing is being weird again. Sorry about that. There we go. Okay. So any questions so far about magic?
Not at the moment.
But I'm sure you will.
They'll come up when we start.
I have one right now. So I know we talked about the difference between the spirit magic and the rune magic. Is there anything that, like, dependent on what you're based in, is almost like, I guess, less free points, but more like you're better at one thing over another, or not really?
In terms of magic, it all depends on your power.
Okay, so just based solely on the power.
Right. If your character rolled a high power, then you would be a more powerful magician. You would be able to impose your will upon other characters or monsters.
Gotcha. So that's in the character creation part that differentiation happens.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Okay. All right.
And then the final thing here under magic is spirit combat. This is RuneQuest does a lot of stuff with planes, and you do have creatures coming from different planes to do combat with you. So there's a lot to do with elementals. You may have seen some of your characters have the ability to summon and dispel elementals. But there are also spirits, and you will run into this in the adventure, where a spirit will attack you and try to damage you or to possess you. And you will have to go into spirit combat with that spirit. And spirit combat, just like everything else, is a skill. And you have the ability, this character has a 40% spirit combat. So if they were to have a spirit attack them, they would have a chance, just like combat, to attack at 40% and defend at 40%. And a successful attack with this character does the 1d6 plus 1 damage right here. And that damages your magic points. So this character, if I were advising him, would not go into spirit combat if he could possibly avoid it, because he doesn't have strong combat ability and he doesn't have the magic points necessary to take a lot of spirit magic or spirit combat damage.
Now,
So
is there
go
a
ahead.
base? Is there a base value if you don't have anything in that box where there's where the spirit combat is blank? I have spirit combat damage, but I don't have a value in the spirit combat.
Because I didn't, it's on the second page under magic.
Okay.
I just didn't put it in both places.
Oh, okay. All right. So I'll just throw it. I'll just copy that up there so that when I'm looking at it, I know. Okay, great.
So any questions so far? And
You
y'all have
talked
been really good.
you talked about recovering magic points. Does that have anything to do with the meditate skill on the second page?
It can, yes.
Okay. I guess when we after we finish our first combat and we're recovering, you can tell us about that.
and it would really deal more. It's more the end of an adventure, not the end of an individual combat.
Oh, okay.
So recovery in RuneQuest is much slower than it is in D&D. So you're not going, like under your characteristics here, you see you have a healing rate of 3 hit points per week, and that's your natural healing rate. So it's not like a long rest is going to heal all your hit points. You're going to go through the entire adventure desperately clinging on to your hit points, and then you would take in RuneQuest, a long rest would be a month's rest in order to recover those hit points. And so this gets into that adventuring by season rather than being a
Right.
constant adventurer.
Yeah, okay, I see.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then the last thing
You mean like how people actually work? Wild.
I wasn't going to say that. I like D&D. I love playing it. This is just some of the realism that attracted me to RuneQuest.
Yeah, basic edition. D&D was like that. You healed at a rate of like 1 hit point per day or something without magic.
Yeah. Okay. The last thing I want to cover with RuneQuest is abilities. This is something, and you have to forgive me with D&D. I jumped from AD&D to 5e, so I missed everything in between. So I don't know when this came into play, but it's one of the things that I did like about learning 5e is the abilities. So your investigation, your perception, intimidation, arcana, some of those different abilities, those are played out much more in RuneQuest, and you have a certain percentage ability to do anything. And rather than being a DC on how difficult the task is, your chances of success are based on how good you are at that certain ability. So the tasks can be, there is a rule for making them more difficult. The tasks can be more difficult. Typically they're not. Typically unlocking a lock is unlocking a lock, and you would roll against, and I don't know where my cursor is, but you would roll here under manipulation in the middle of the page, the device skill. So this person would not be a very good thief because he's not going to be very good at picking locks or setting traps. But this is all of your abilities. And during normal gameplay, I'm either going to challenge you to make a particular roll. So let's say Ferg goes into the bar and he wants to talk to the bartender, and the bartender is not being very cooperative. And he would have a chance to, under communication, say, charm the bartender, intimidate the bartender, dance with the bartender. But depending on how he were interacting in the game with the bartender, if he were trying to get all tough and in his face, he would play that out, and I would say, okay, roll your intimidation roll or roll your intimidate roll to see if he successfully got the cooperation out of the bartender that he wanted. But that would depend on really how he was playing. I would tell him, okay, I see what you're doing here. In order to successfully do it, you need to roll your intimidation roll. There are other rolls that you tell me. Under perception here in the middle column, about the middle of the page, you're in a room and you are looking for the hidden door. And you would tell me, okay, I'm going to roll my search roll and see what I find. So it's going to be up to you. Sometimes I'll tell you what to roll. Sometimes you'll tell me what you want to roll, or tell me I want to look for a secret door, and I will tell you roll your search skill. With these, it's the same as the others. You want to roll that number or lower. So let's say Ferg is searching for the trap door. I rolled a 51. He has a 45 search. He did not find the trap door. And then your weapons abilities are here. If it's got a 0, that means that you just cannot do it at all. Anything with at least a 5, you can try. Let's see, what's something in here. Dodge. He's got a really bad dexterity. He's got a 7% chance of actually dodging an attack. This character is good at short sword. He's also good at dagger, good at small shield, not particularly stealthy, but does have good listen and scan, so a quite perceptive character. So you'll find that your character, even though may not be good at combat, does have a lot of other abilities that they can contribute to the successful adventure. Makes sense with abilities.
So, like, if my character for climb has 0, like, he's not going to be doing any climbing.
Not going to be doing any climbing.
Interesting. Okay, there we go.
Yeah, and then my character has under stealth, it's got a base modifier of -10, and then both hide and move quietly are 0. So it's like you're not gonna do, and you're really not gonna try this.
Fascinating.
So you're that quintessential like paladin in a full suit of armor clomping through.
Must be something like that. Yeah.
Clomp, 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 clomp.
Yeah.
Well, what leads to these, the modifiers are determined at the point of character generation. And those are the result of usually 2 to 3 of your characteristics providing you with a bonus or a penalty. In the case of stealth, you are probably have a high size and a high power. And those are the things that would make you be less than stealthy as a character. This character has very high communication modifier of 15, which means without looking, it's a high charisma and a high power.
Yeah, I have a 16 size and an 18 power, so
yeah. So yeah, you're not hiding anywhere. So power provides you with an aura, and you're just
okay.
You're going to be noticed.
Okay.
You don't glow in the dark necessarily, but you're noticeable in a crowd. And then you've got money. Wheels are gold pieces. Lunars are silver pieces. Clacks are copper pieces. Bulgs are basically lead. I think that's what ogres like to deal with. But typically we'll be dealing in wheels, lunars, and clacks. Gold, silver, and copper. Silver is the base currency. Typically, 1 silver piece, 1 lunar is a day's earning or a day's living that you've got. So, if you've got a wheel, that's probably about a day's worth of money that you would have.
Okay.
So that is Runequest.
All right.
Giddy up.
Sweet. Okay, so if you are watching this, thank you for tuning in. We are Adventures on Tap. We run local charities and games at local breweries. We raise money for local charities. So you can see those on the underneath us. Our stream charity is Child's Play. Child's Play is what is it? It's a why can't I think of the words? It's it gamifies recovery.
Yes, it gamifies recovery for children in hospitals.
That's funny. I can't talk right now for whatever reason. But my son was able to benefit from some of the services of Child's Play when he was in the hospital. So it was really cool to see the different types of items and just the strategies or things that they are able to use to help the healing process, especially for young kids. So it's a charity that's near and dear to my heart, as I'm sure it is to some other people. And but yeah, so if you feel so inclined, you can look them up, and this will probably be on YouTube. So yeah, you just search in Child's Play. It's nationwide, and feel free to share to donate if it's something that aligns with you. And then as far as if you're local for us and you're tuning in, we do local games here at breweries and raise money for charities. The next event is Oviedo Brewing on November 30th. Mike will be running Runequest there. I think there's only one seat left though, so if you see this and you're interested, get on it quick. But yeah, I don't know if anybody has anything else to pitch in. Feel free to go ahead. But that was our quick session 0 to RuneQuest, and then hopefully you will stick around and watch us play our little one shot that's coming up right after this. We good? Everybody good? Okay. All right. Bye-bye. We'll see you later.